What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This here's Legitical Response. We cover political news. We keep you up to date and keep you informed with everything that the government does. Now, sometimes we don't have a whole hell of a lot of news, going on with the government and politics and all that stuff. So sometimes we cover Supreme Court cases, right? Like, I love to get out there and talk about some of this. I love mixing my ideas back and forth with people online. I love hearing the feedback from some of you guys. So, like I always say, y'all let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comments section. But we've got a situation here that I think we need to talk about. We need to have a discussion about. So, you know what? Let's go ahead and get right into it. Go ahead, just jump right in. Screw my rant. We don't need me ranting on forever, right? Check it out, y'all. U.S. Supreme Court rejects Black Lives Matter activists' appeal over protest incident. Now, basically what this is, there was a protest, I think in 2016, as a Black Lives Matter, after some guy got shot by police. And it was a justified shooting, by the way, just because, I looked up the case when I read this story. I went ahead and looked up the case just so I could put my 2 cents in. The guy was, he was selling CDs at a convenience store, and the cops stopped him and tried to search him, and he resisted and started fighting with the cops, and they ended up killing him. Right? Like, you can't fight with cops, y'all. You just can't do that, right? Like, why would you want to punch somebody or fight with somebody who has a gun and has a justifiable reason to kill you if you attack them, right? Like, because the cops don't know if you have some sort of a weapon, right? Like, that's the dumbest thing people can do, right? Like, I just don't understand some of these people that will get out there and fight with the cops. I understand that not all cops are good, right? We have bad cops out there. As a matter of fact, probably the majority of cops aren't good cops. They're either neutral or they're bad cops, right? Like, the neutral ones are just as bad as the bad cops sometimes for not standing up and fighting and doing the right thing, right? Like, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're in an environment where, if you speak out and say, hey, there's something wrong here, you'll get fired for it, or whatever. And, should that be something you do? If it's a grave injustice and you see a bunch of dirty cops doing some dirty stuff, yeah, don't go to your commanding officer. Go to the freaking state police or something, you come out as a whistleblower, essentially, and you get whistleblower protections. But, that's enough of that. Let's get into the story. The U.S. Supreme Court on Monday allowed a Black Lives Matter activist to be sued by a Louisiana police officer injured during a protest in 2016 in a case that could make it riskier to engage in public demonstrations, a hallmark of American democracy. Now, what they're talking about here is, okay, there was a protest, and their cops were there, as cops are at most protests. In case shit gets out of hand, they can start arresting people, right? Well, they had the leader of the protest was doing his thing, and somebody in the protest crowd threw a damn rock and hit a cop in the face, knocking out some teeth and doing a bunch of damage to his face. Well, they never found out who done it, right? Like, they couldn't find the guy. Because that's how these Black Lives Matter activists work, right? Like, something like that happens and they just scatter. You can't find who done it. That's why there was hardly any arrests, in proportion to the amount of people that were causing violence in 2020, right? Like, all those BLM riots, that was just outright nuts. And there was a lot of disproportional arrests, if you will, like a lot of people got away scot-free for burning down police offices and, courthouses and all this other stuff. People got away scot-free for that. Burning down family-owned local businesses, for God's sakes. That was just, that stuff broke my freaking heart, to be honest with you, man. Watching these people of the community, community leaders, got their business, been having their business for a long time, and these rioters come in from wherever and just burn it down, dude. That was just nuts. I couldn't believe what was going on. And, like I said, it kind of broke my heart to watch all this happen over something that the corporate press lied to the American people and had, basically, in my opinion, the corporate press should be held liable for all damages in 2020. Hands down, right off. Let me know what you think in the comments section. They should be held liable for purveying, for promoting the lies about George Floyd. Right? Like, no, they didn't say, they didn't give the whole story. They didn't say why Derek Chauvin's knee was on his neck. They just tried to portray it as a racist white guy killed a black man. Of course you're going to piss people off, right? They didn't give out all the actions that led up to that incident, right? Like, they didn't tell people that he was on a speedball, he punched a pregnant woman, he was safe in the back of the cop car. Right? Arrested in handcuffs, perfectly safe in the back of a cop car, and he was yelling and screaming to get out, talking about he couldn't breathe and all this other stuff. Right? Because he was overdosing on drugs. They let him out. He tried to run off. He tried to escape. So that's when Derek Chauvin came in and put him on the ground, face down on the ground, and put his knee in between his neck on his shoulder blades, like not directly on his neck, but kind of halfway on his neck and halfway on his spine, right? Like, that's what they're trained to do. And I still can't believe they found Derek Chauvin guilty of murder for that, right? Like, that's what it just blew my mind. That's what he was trained for. But let's not harp on that. In declining to hear DeRay McKesson's appeal, the justices left in place a lower court's decision reviving a lawsuit by the Baton Rouge police officer, John Ford, who accused him of negligence after being struck by a rock during a protest sparked by the fatal police shooting of a black man, Alton Sterling. The New Orleans-based Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in 2023 rejected McKesson's defense that his rights to free speech and assembly under the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment protection from him the negligence claim. McKesson's was represented by lawyers including from the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. Yay. The Baton Rouge protest was one of numerous demonstrations in the United States in 2015 and 2016 arising from incidents involving police and black individuals. These predated the massive racial justice protests that flared in various cities in the United States and abroad following the 2020 murder of George Floyd, a black man, by a white police officer in Minneapolis. Like I've said before, why do they got to put it that way? They're only trying to sow racial division when they do that. The Fifth Circuit's decision to allow Ford's lawsuit could make it easier to sue protest leaders for the illegal conduct of an attendee, an outcome that, according to some legal scholars, could stifle activism seeking political or societal change. Now, I would happen to agree with that, right? Like I said, the protest leader got arrested and got charged with negligence for something that somebody in the crowd done, right? Like, that's wrong to me. You shouldn't be able to do that. Like, I'm trying to figure out how they came to this conclusion. But I do understand that, somebody has to be accountable. This guy's face got screwed up really bad because of this, right? And holding the protest leader accountable for it, is that the right thing to do? Man, it's hard to say because, once again, like, this kind of sets it up for Trump, if you will, right? Like, I don't think this guy should be held responsible for negligence. But at the same time, this is the kind of the same argument that Trump was responsible for January 6th. Even though they stormed the Capitol before he even left his rally, when they started to storm the Capitol. So how the hell can he be, responsible for that? Sterling was shot by a Baton Rouge police officer on July 5th, 2016, after a struggle outside a convenience store where he was selling homemade CDs. The death inflamed racial tensions in the city. The protest 4 days later demanding accountability took place in the area in front of police headquarters. Ford was among the officers assigned to make arrests of protesters on a public highway. He was struck in the face by a rock or a piece of concrete hurled by an unidentified person, losing teeth and suffering head and brain injuries, according to his lawsuit. Ford's lawsuit seeking monetary damages argued that McKesson should have known from his actions leading the protest that it would turn violent. Yeah, most of those protests do turn violent. But, how is he going to know it's going to turn violent? Of course, these people do promote violence all the damn time. So, if they're actively encouraging violence or on the line of encouraging violence, maybe he is responsible. It would really depend on what he was doing, what he was telling the crowd, and how they were reacting to what he was saying. If he was out there saying,
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Okay, so, if he's telling them to be peaceful, I don't see charging this guy. But if he's out there like, get in these cops' face, push the line, blah, 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 blah. If he's out there egging these people on and saying inflammatory stuff.
Tomorrow, we need to go into the Capitol. Into the Capitol.
Then maybe he should be charged, right? Like, my mind just changed on that one, right? But it depends on what the guy was saying. It really depends on the context. Was he actually inciting violence? Or, pushing in that direction? If he was, then sure. But if he wasn't, then no. Hell no. Right? Because that will stifle any later protests, because nobody's going to want to put together a protest if they could possibly get charged with negligence, negligent homicide if somebody dies, right? Like, nobody wants to be responsible for that. And you could say this, you could have, take some Proud Boys, for instance, right? Some Proud Boys were at a rally. They were just doing their thing, just having a good old time. It wasn't a protest. It was just a rally, right? And some Antifa members show up, right? And we've talked about this on the channel before, but Antifa shows up, and they start agging on the Proud Boys, right? And they start, throwing stuff at them and starting crap, basically. So the Proud Boys, they finally had all their buttons pushed, and they go over there and they start fighting. Well, when the cops show up, all the Antifa members, they just take off running and they scatter, right? And the Proud Boys are like, hey, yeah, we called you guys over here, blah, 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 blah. What's your name? Give me your IDs and all that. And the Proud Boys got arrested for that because Antifa started a fight with them. They were calling it mutual combat. Right? So the Antifa guys just completely got away scot-free, while the Proud Boys, who were just defending themselves, got arrested. So we're getting into dangerous territory, right? Like, it just really depends on the situation, on what's going on, what the protest is about, what the protest leader is doing, the people with the bullhorns, what they're saying. Are they inciting violence, essentially, even without actually inciting violence? Are they saying inflammatory stuff? It would really depend on that. McKesson was arrested on the day of the protest, but the charge was later dropped. U.S. District Judge Brian Jackson dismissed Ford's suit in 2017, but the Fifth Circuit in 2023 revived it, finding that the First Amendment did not bar the negligence claim, right? Like, okay, so they're trying to claim, essentially, that the guy throwing the rock falls under First Amendment. Hang on. I think they could come up with a better claim than that, unless I'm misreading this wrong, right? Right, like, once again, it all falls down to what the guy was saying. Was he inciting violence, or, what exactly was going on? Defines context, and the fact that the U.S. Circuit, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, is actually allowing this lawsuit to go through, kind of tells me that, yeah, he was, using violent rhetoric in his speech, and that could be leading directly to the cause of the guy throwing the rock. So maybe it is justified here. The Fifth Circuit rejected an argument that the lawsuit was foreclosed by a 1982 Supreme Court ruling involving black civil rights activists in Mississippi, limiting liability for protest leaders over the conduct of others when they are involved in actions protected by the First Amendment. So basically, they would have to prove, once again, what this guy was saying. So the fact that they're going ahead and going through with this lawsuit tells me that this guy was saying some inflammatory rhetoric, right? That's what it tells me. Y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comment section. A dissenting Fifth Circuit Judge Don Willett invoked Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s march in 1965 from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, drawing attention to the disenfranchisement of black voters. Political uprisings from picketing to riots have marked our history from the beginning, Willett noted. The Fifth Circuit's majority theory would have enfeebled America's street-blocking civil rights movement, imposing ruinous financial liability against citizens for exercising core First Amendment freedoms, Willett wrote. McKesson's case had made it to the Supreme Court once before. The justices in 2020 ordered additional review by lower courts to determine whether Louisiana state law allowed for Ford's claim. The Black Lives Matter movement was formed after the killing of a black 17-year-old named Trayvon Martin by a man named George Zimmerman in Florida in 2012. I'm sure you all remember that. Its activists have criticized over aggressive policing, particularly against black people. Yeah, they've done a whole hell of a lot more than that, right? Like, these people get out there and they get violent and they start riots, right? Like I've said it before, that the Summer of Love, the BLM riots of 2020, could definitionally, or is definitionally, an insurrection because they were firebombing police stations, courthouses, government buildings. Right? Like, not only family businesses and all this other stuff, but government buildings. That is definitionally an insurrection. Right? So if you want to call what happened on January 6th an insurrection, then you have to call what happened in the summer of 2020, all the BLM riots, an insurrection too. You can't have it both ways. I'm sorry. That's just not how logic works. You can sit there and cry and scream and bitch and moan about this all you want, but it's definitionally an insurrection. But that's all I got for this one. I want y'all to let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comments section. You know, do you think that these protest leaders, if they are using violent rhetoric like this, should they be criminally liable for anything that happens in the protest? Y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comments section. That's all I got for this one. I want to thank everybody for watching. And y'all try to have a good day and stay legitical. Peace.